We're going to call the October 24th meeting in Placer County Transportation open.
Thanks.
Mike, want to lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Solly, can we have roll call, please?
Broadway. Here. Duncan. Harvey.
Here.
Holmes.
Here.
Nader. Powers. Rohan. Here. Trebus. Mueller.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, are there any questions or corrections on the minutes? And if not, can I get a
Move approval.
motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Agenda review. Any questions or comments on the agenda? If not, can I get a motion?
I have no comments. Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public comment. This is time for the public to make any comments they'd like for things that are not on this agenda. So is there any public comment? If there is, please step up to the podium. Okay, with that, no public comment. Move on to consent calendar. These items are all routine and non-controversial. So is there anything that needs to be pulled or discussed on the consent calendar?
I have none.
Anybody from the public? Okay, with that,
Approval of consent.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing, annual unmet transit needs.
All right, good morning, everyone. The unmet transit needs presentation is going to be my item today, and I have a slide presentation which will be appearing shortly. So for those of you, I see some new faces in the room, so I'm going to provide a little bit of background on the transit services that are available in Placer County. So we have 6 transit operators, 4 of which are traditional bus operators, 2 in the cities, 1 throughout Placer County, and then 1 up in the Tahoe area. Then we also have a social service bus operator, which operates the MyRides and Health Express systems. Then we have 1 intercity train, which is Capital Corridor, and these systems are pretty well used. Last year in 2017, people in Placer County took some form of these transit 1.2 million times. So this unmet transit needs is a type of outreach that PCTPA does every year, and it's required by the type of funding that we get for our transit services. So we do this outreach every year in October, and while it's a requirement, we find that it's actually pretty useful for a number of things. First, for education purposes, a lot of folks learn about transit through this outreach process. For marketing, it's a good way to remind people about service and changes to it. And also there are improvements to the service that come out of this process, even if they're not formal unmet transit needs. Some examples of these are on the screen, including a bus pass subsidy for social service organizations, improvements to service, and changes to routes. So far throughout the month of October, PCTPA has held 4 in-person meetings, including today. The first was in Lincoln, then we had one up the hill in Tahoe, and then a meeting in Auburn last week, and then today we'll have a hearing at our board meeting. These hearings were advertised in newspapers, on our social media, through our email, and all of that type of thing. But as in previous years, most of the comments that we get and the feedback that we get is through our online survey. So as of today, we have 134 online responses to our survey about unmet transit needs. So I pulled some stats for you guys in case you're curious about who's commenting on this process. So the majority of people who are commenting either ride transit all the time or never ride it. And we're getting a pretty good spread of people from across the county. The dark blue, which is county, that includes the unincorporated areas outside Tahoe. We've gotten about 10 comments in that area, if you're curious. A couple of topics that are major being covered in the commenters, a lot of talk about the Roseville commuter service, a lot of talk about transit commuter service from Rockland and Lincoln, and then some conversations about rural areas, a lot of types of comments that we've received in previous years. So after we get all these comments, the process is that PCTPA reviews these comments, and essentially they're being reviewed for 3 qualifications. They're compared to existing service. A lot of times we get comments saying that they need a service and it's really a matter of education. That service actually does exist, they just don't know about it. Then it's compared to the unmet transit needs definition, which requires that it be within the scope of unmet transit needs. So it can't be about fare prices, it can't be about bus stop locations on the block, that type of thing. And then it's compared with the short-range transit plans, which, as all of our board members know, we've recently updated. And so the requests from the public will be compared against the recommendations that are in those plans. And finally, they're compared to the reasonableness criteria. If we implemented this improvement that's being suggested, would it have good fare box revenue? Is it consistent with our planning goals? That type of evaluation. So once all those comments are reviewed, they're put together in a report, and that draft report is presented to our Social Service Transportation Advisory Council in January. And then after their review, that council will make recommendations based on the comments that were collected, and then we'll bring that together in a final report, and I'll be bringing that back to you guys in February, and all the findings from the SS TAC will be reviewed then, and there'll be a determination from this year's unmet transit needs process. So at this point, I recommend that the board opens it up to a formal hearing. And for those of you who are here to make comments on transit, I just ask that you state your name for the record, and also that a good comment is as specific as possible. It really helps us identify where exactly it is you want to go from and where exactly it is you want to go to, how often you want to do it. The more details you provide, the easier it is for us to understand whether or not it's reasonable. So I'll also take questions at this time.
Okay, thank you so much,
I just have a
Mr.
comment.
Holmes.
I thank you for the presentation, and I want to thank you for reaching out to the Placer County Youth Commission and presenting to them, because our young people nowadays have different modes of transportation, from skateboards to who knows what. So I really appreciate you bringing this to their attention. Many of those young people are heading off to college this next year, and they'll have to figure out how they're going to get around campus. So thank you for that. That's my comments.
Thank you. Do I see anyone else? I see, that's my light. All right, so we'll open this up to public comment. So if you have a public comment, please step up to the podium.
Good morning, Lee Bastian, Sheridan Municipal Advisory Council. Again, I come to you because we have no transit service, and I have several of our residents who are looking for it.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Beth Muser, and I am the Resident Service Coordinator at Mercy Housing Macaulay Meadows, which services, we are a low-income, independent apartment complex for 55 and older. And as Resident Service Coordinator, I help connect my residents with resources, help them keep their housing, many different things. And one of the biggest challenges my residents have is transportation. We have a bus stop right out in front of our building, but people with mobility issues, confidence, vision problems, the bus system, although it's wonderful and the Auburn Transit has been very supportive, it's still very hard for many of my seniors to use and navigate. You know, you have to get off the bus, you have to wait, sometimes a trip just down 49 can take 3 and 4 hours. So a group of my residents are here to just advocate for maybe dial-a-ride, door-to-door service. You know, numerous times I hear that my residents have missed important appointments, doctor's appointments, attorneys. They have a lack of connectiveness to the community because they're not able to get out and about, and they're isolated. And if you don't know, isolation is very detrimental to the health and well-being of anybody, especially seniors. So I see a lot of that in my building because of the lack of, you know, dial-a-ride basically, or something that comes right up to the front door of our building. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none. Oh.
Good morning. Mike Garabedian for Placer Group Sierra Club. We support this effort, but it needs to be part of something bigger to be as effective as desired. And what it needs to be is part of a core, our own county, that serves our county transit route back and forth between Lincoln and Roseville. It has to feed into that. It needs to be something that we can all use. It has to be, this is a step. This is a step on the way to that. What it needs to be is something that we can all use. It needs to be an extension of, there are five different things we're looking at this point. Extension of regional transit out here, connecting to the airport, for instance. The 1995 study to Roseville, phase one of that study of rail transit to Roseville, that study did not go to the next stage because at that time there wasn't ridership or funding for it. That's one possibility. The state rail plan, a change in that is a possibility. The Capitol Corridor, a side rail to Lincoln. And I may be forgetting one, but this is where your own creativity and all of our creativity comes in to figure out how to accomplish our own, if it's just our own, going back and forth, or connected to these other systems or something new. It's really a test of leadership. This is really a historic moment, just like housing is, because you can't improve, you can't make transit better. You making that better also increases the value of your neighborhoods and makes it more expensive for people. So our goals that we're trying to meet through affordable housing, in the Sierra Club's language, housing for all incomes, has to be coming along at the same time as transit. This transit system needs to be affordable, needs to be reliable, fast, convenient, fun, enjoyable, and work for all, work for people in their workplaces. It needs to be safe. Perhaps, and it's talking about something that's a boost for our economy, for businesses to connect to our commercial areas, our neighborhoods, and the casino, for example, an opportunity for the casino to look at others around the world and figure out how to have that service to that casino, for instance, to the airport and back and forth. And of course, part of the goal here, the Sierra Club, I would certainly think would consider supporting a quarter-cent increase in sales tax to support this kind of a transit. Now, the biggest test for this might be something that you would use to carry out your civic duties, and you might know better what that would be than I do. So the rest of the items on this agenda that we'll be speaking to are different. They are emphasizing different expenses and not the transit we need to go to. So we hope we can figure out together how to do that.
Mr. Garabedian, Madam Chair, if I may, a couple questions. Mr. Garabedian, first of all, you've been in this chamber on numerous occasions, spoken to this board and our Board of Supervisors, and I'm curious, because in the past you've been here as a Citrus Heights resident speaking about a project in Colfax. You've been here as a Loomis resident speaking about a project in Lincoln. You've been here as a Roseville resident speaking about stuff in West Placer. So today you're a resident of where?
Lincoln.
Of Lincoln. Okay, that's a new one.
Yes, you could say that I've had a chance to live in Roseville, Lincoln, Loomis. I lived in a number of places, and basically what that has given me is an understanding of what the commuting and traffic situations are in those communities.
Okay.
And how.
Well, to that end, I'm just curious, have you used our transit system?
No.
You haven't?
Not for local transit.
How'd you get here today?
I drove.
Having formerly lived in Roseville, you're familiar with this, there's a little facility down there called the Galleria.
Oh, yes.
You familiar with that? Do you realize that there's a bus that leaves the Roseville Galleria at 6:30, one at 7:30, one at 8:30, that arrive about 200 yards right down there at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, that somebody from Lincoln could have driven to the Galleria, gotten on a bus, paid $2.50 on that bus to get up here in time to be here at this meeting.
Maybe you did that from your home.
No, I didn't. I drove.
But let me say that several months ago, I got all of the maps of all of the different services, studied them all, and I'm familiar with the routes.
And yet, you just choose not to use it. Thank you, Mr. Garabedian.
I'm not sure what that has to do with my presentation.
Thank you very much.
Maybe you do. Thank you. Be talking to you later.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'm going to close public session and come back for, this is an action item, so I'll entertain. It says action. Just to have it, okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to adjourn as the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency and convene as the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. And first of all, I'll entertain approval for the consent calendar. Been approved, and do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. So we'll go to item number I, which is the 2018-2019 budget amendment.
Good morning. I'll be presenting this item. So this is budget amendment number 1 for the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. And annually, we prepare a budget in June, and we come back in October with a budget amendment so that the budget is consistent with the budget that's prepared for PCTPA and reflected in the overall work program. And the budget amendment number 1 is shown on the flip side of the staff report, called attachment 1. And so I'll go through briefly on the budget. The operating budget as proposed under Amendment 1, it shows a 9.6% increase, or approximately $176,000 and some change. And these are based on final adjustments in the carryover from fiscal year 17-18, as well as an increase in state transit assistance funds. The operating expenditures show a 1.1% increase, approximately 1.5 million, as compared to the June budget. And the changes in the operating expenditures are due to various technical budget adjustments for staff administration, the Health Express contract, which you just approved on the consent calendar for the CTSA, as well as additional funds to implement the short-range transit plans and an analysis of a recommended college pass program that was identified in the short-range transit plan. These expenditures are offset by a minor decrease in the bus pass subsidy program. So all of these differences are shown in a column on the budget sheet, shows difference that says difference between Amendment 1 versus adopted. And so in case if you want to look at the numbers more closely. At the end, the bottom line is that there's a projected increase of approximately $526,000 in carryover funds. Now, we note in the staff report that's large. However, during the discussions on the short-range transit plan over spring and the summer that you all probably recall, we identified that there would be a need for a large budget surplus because for the CTSA budget starting in next year, we will be doing a coordinated procurement with Placer County on their dollar ride and with our Health Express. And as you have all experienced as part of your roles as elected officials, costs are increasing, budgets are increasing, so we anticipate that the Health Express contract will go up, notwithstanding that we're coordinating that procurement with the dollar ride service. And we're also looking at budget increases on the call center and the mobility management program in fiscal year 2021. And that contract and agreement is currently with Roseville and will need to be renegotiated at that time. So the budget surplus that we show here now is basically, as was identified in the short-range transit plan, and the expenditures and costs over the 7-year period will be used to offset those cost increases. And so with that, we reviewed it with the Transit Operator Working Group and with the TAC, and they all concurred with the staff recommendation, and I'd be glad to answer any questions with respect to the budget.
I have no questions.
I see no questions. Any questions from the audience?
Yes.
Come on up.
Our concerns and comments are based on providing all a copy of this. A couple of you have seen this before. This is a transportation policy brief from Transportation Institute at UC Davis. It's called Increasing Highway Capacity Unlikely to Relieve traffic congestion. Urge you to take a look at it.
Thank you.
Welcome. Basically, the emphasis on increasing highway capacity is mistaken. It's not a good use of public funds. The key point here is, of course, is that it does not relieve congestion. The studies all show that. And this agency has commented that 20% of the people who would be using SR 65 now aren't, and need that added capacity. Well, this is basically how it works now. We understand what the traffic patterns are, and we go on and use it. So you have 20% or more of people ready to go on and use whatever added capacity this brings. But we think the most critical point here, both for this and the next agenda item, is to understand what is a good use of public funds. And of course, we would advocate that transit needs to be a much bigger part of your program, as we just said. So we hope you all look at this, and we look forward to discussing that with you and the staff in the future. So we're concerned about the direction, the wrong direction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, no.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, we are going to adjourn as the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency and convene as the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency and go to item number J.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Board of Directors. I'll introduce this item shortly and then turn it over to Luke McNeil-Carrot, our Deputy Director, to complete the briefing and staff report. Just wanted to highlight that this is a regular process that we go through on an annual basis. We adopt our overall work plan, which is our guiding document that has to go through an approval process with Caltrans. And then we come back in in October and in February and amend that document as appropriate as costs change and as revenues change. So today we have a presentation of the things that have changed since the original adoption of the plan. It includes items in most categories of the inner workings of the agency and some of our most critical programs. With that, I'll turn that over to Luke. Luke and Shirley LeBlanc, I just wanted to highlight that they've worked very hard on this document, and both of them have put a lot of time and thought into this and have created a balanced document that provides increased contingencies for items and increased reserves for items as directed by the board. So with that, I'll turn it over to Luke.
Good morning. So you should all have a document in your packet. That's Amendment 1 to the fiscal year 2018-19 overall work program and budget. Of course, every document we bring to you has a focus on project implementation and core agency activities, but I'll just highlight some of the key changes between the final document that you saw in May and Amendment 1. So I'm going to go in order here. First one is Work Element 27. This is the Airport Land Use Commission, and we've updated this to reflect the anticipated approval of the Auburn Airport Master Plan update. Then we have Work Element 41. This is the Interstate 80 State Route 65 interchange. We've worked out a deal with Caltrans where it would just be more efficient if we contracted with people instead of them. And so we've swapped funds, and they've given us some money, and we've added that in here to do some of the environmental permitting through PCTPA instead of Caltrans. And then Work Element 42, this is the Highway 65 widening. We've increased this budget for existing and anticipated legal costs, approximately $72,000 related to the ongoing lawsuit with Sierra Club. And then Work Element 80, this is Freeway Service Patrol. As you may be aware, the Senate Bill 1 included additional funding for Freeway Service Patrol, so we're waiting to see what happens with Senate Bill 1 in the election coming up, but for now we've added the funding in the overall work program, but not necessarily increasing service yet. And then the last one is Work Element 60. This is the Regional Transportation Funding Strategy, and this has been increased or updated to reflect the proposed budget of the anticipated funding strategy consultant, which you're going to hear under the next item. I do want to note that everyone's a little worried about the economy. We don't know when the next downturn is going to come, but it sure will come. We know that. And so we've increased our contingency funding by adding $120,000, and this brings us a little bit closer to the recommended 15%. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Questions from the audience?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike Garabedian, Placer Group Sierra Club. The comments we just made on the last item apply equally, if not more so, to this one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll bring it back.
Move approval of the item?
Second. Been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We'll go to item number K.
Good morning again, Madam Chair and members of the board. This item before you today is a two-part item. One is an update from staff and Mark Watts on the legislative efforts to create a sub-county district for the potential funding strategy for November of 2020. The second part of the presentation will be a overview of the contract that staff that has been in the staff's work plan and that we have implemented to select and recommend a consultant to prepare that outreach strategy. The first item in terms of the legislative update, the board of directors over the last 2 to 3 years after the Measure M did not pass, directed staff to revise and move in a route of creating a sub-county district as opposed to pursuing a potential countywide measure. And so we worked in 2017 with a coalition led by San Diego County to create that district. For reasons unrelated to the legislation, San Diego County decided to move in a different direction and decided not to pursue that legislation. So we asked Mark Watts, our state legislative consultant, to work with us to revise legislation to create an item that would be able to be introduced after the election in January, that would be, again, led by a broad-based coalition of counties. Mark has been working very diligently on that, and with that, I'll turn it over to Mark to give you the latest update on where we're at with that legislation.
Thank you, Chair and board members. I'm pleased to be back here. As Director Lucan mentioned, we had a San Diego author walk away from a bill, but one of the nice things that they did for us after they dropped the bill was they worked with Legislative Council to develop a first round of what the language would actually look like that we would be able to pick up and use. So that effort was completed last spring, and it's left it to us to do some more refining. Today, there's 3 things I wanted to touch. First, I had our pardon me, I'm struggling with my voice, so I have to think ahead before I speak. There were 3 immediate tasks that were assigned as we came on board. First was to develop a coalition of interested agencies, or at least supporters, ensure that the language is going to do what we need it to do if we proceed, and identify an author. With respect to the coalition, we worked in September with CalCog to identify potential aspiring self-help counties. We figured that the best group of folks that would be joining a coalition with us would be other counties in a position similar to us, not yet self-help, but also of a size that the revenues generated from a self-help tax would be beneficial. There are some counties that are too small to really pursue this option. We reached out to at least 13 different entities around the state, did some follow-up. We also checked in with a half a dozen of the current self-help counties, because we started hearing that some of them may want to do a second self-help tax, and they may find the sub-county tax jurisdiction is beneficial to them. So we've been in touch with those folks as well. The follow-up in October resulted in 4 to 5 outright support entities throughout the state. And this week, the Self-Help County Coalition at their board meeting will be presenting this issue to the broad 22, 24 member organization. With respect to the language development, as I mentioned, the bill was amended at the after it was put aside by the author last year. Language that was in there has been used. I actually used similar language to that in a bill for Sacramento RT, another client that I have, and it was approved by the governor and accepted by the tax agencies. So we're feeling pretty good that we have the type of language that's going to be necessary to make this work. And I think that's that on the language development. We did have the opportunity to run a part of that language by the county's sales tax consultants, and they signed off on that this last week. So I'm feeling in pretty good shape. I think when we come after the election, we'll be able to start moving rapidly. I would point out that I had hoped that one of the 2 chairs of the transportation committees would be somebody who would consider being authors for us, but we're hearing some rumors about one of the chairs maybe not continuing. So we're going to have to wait till the election, see how the different seats all fall out, and then move ahead at that point in time. So I thank you for the opportunity, and look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Any questions? None? Any questions from the audience? Yeah, Mike has a question if you want to. Mr. Garabedian, my apologies.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Mike Garabedian, Placer Group Sierra Club. We don't have any position that I know of on the past legislation. We might have, I didn't check on it, and certainly don't have any position on this proposal, at least not at this time. What I do want to talk about is the idea of having a vote in a limited part of the county. I don't think that would pass. That would be my opinion. For instance, having lived in Roseville a bit, I understand the traffic patterns there and the use, for instance, of people to access AD from Fiddyment down Foothills Boulevard, Washington, down into the center and accessing out through Atlantic Avenue to Eureka and the other side, and of course Roseville Parkway, which, I mean, you can't use 65 to get directly to, for instance, the Sutter Hospital. You have to get on the Roseville Parkway. These are all heavily used and very well designed to handle traffic internally without having to rely on 65. So it's hard for me to imagine how voters are going to want to spend, in that part of the county, are going to want to support this kind of a measure. So thank you.
Mike, do you have a question, sir? Do you have a question? Those questions, were there any questions of the presentation?
No, I'm just speaking to what I mentioned.
Okay.
Maybe I misunderstood the reason to be here. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? Seeing none, we'll
Thanks, Mark.
bring back, thank you, Mark. Item number. So we need to take action on authorize.
We actually have a second part of our presentation,
Oh.
sorry.
Go ahead.
So the second part of our presentation, excuse me, Madam Chair, is dealing with the action item before you, which is the outreach services contract proposed for FSB core strategies. On this item, very quickly to go over the process we utilized, as directed by the board, we created a subcommittee of board members made up of Mayor Rohan, Mayor Broadway, Councilman Nader, and Supervisor Holmes, that would, along with staff, review proposals received for this work to hire a consultant to outreach to the community to explain the importance of transportation improvements to the county. We received 7 proposals from firms throughout the state of California. We shortlisted 2 of those proposals. The two shortlisted proposals were the firms of TBWB, which was previously under contract to the PCTPA, and FSB Core Strategies, who was the consultant during the Measure M process. That subcommittee held interviews with those 2 firms, and after that interview process and after reviewing their written proposals, the subcommittee unanimously selected FSB FSB core strategies to be recommended to the board as a consultant best positioned to develop, in their terms, a community-based outreach program. The scope of work that you have before you is designed to start after the election, to first analyze our existing outreach programs for social media, for collateral material, and for other items that PCTPA normally does, and then meet with the board. The first step the board asked for is to have a special meeting right after the election to check in to determine if there needed to be a course correction in the outreach program for any consultant that was hired. And so we have scheduled that for November 14th from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. and then move forward with an outreach strategy first in year one, which would be an outreach to most of the county to talk about transportation improvements and the importance of those, and then a more focused program and a more intense program in year two, which would focus again on the same thing, and then position the board and the rest of the county to be able to make a choice whether they wanted to put an item on the November 2020 ballot for a half-cent measure. I'll conclude my part of the presentation, but we have Cherry Spriggs Hernandez here who will make a short presentation on her approach and work program for the board.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. I'm just going to get started here with our capabilities. FSB core strategies. I'm the S in FSB, as I mentioned, Cherry Spriggs Hernandez. I think I know most all of you. I have been a South Placer resident since 2001, and I moved to South Placer upon graduating from college in 2001. I have been a resident of Lincoln, though, since 2009, and I serve as a Lincoln Chamber President, as well as have an Economic Development Committee appointment that I'm serving my first term on. And I'm also a board member for Lighthouse Counseling and Family Resource Center, so very involved in South Placer. I'm very passionate and enthusiastic about this program, and I just want to thank you so much for considering our firm to do this work for you all. My business partner, Jeff Flint, who some of you may know, he actually moved to Orange County in 2017 to our Orange County office. We have two offices. We have Orange County in Sacramento, and we employ 24 employees between those two offices year-round. However, in 2017, one of the reasons why Jeff moved down there was because we acquired a firm, or a company, I guess, that helps with canvassing programs, door knocking, get out the vote programs for campaigns, as well as public affairs, corporate public affairs programs. So when you factor in all those employees, we actually employ over 100 people throughout the state at any given time. So Jeff moved down there to focus on that, and I've been our partner here in the Sacramento office, but like I said, live in South Placer. So with that being said, we've always had a number of capabilities in terms of public outreach and campaign management that we're known for, but since these various acquisitions that our firm has gone through since 2017 and strategic partnerships that we've made, we have our capabilities are much more seamless when we develop these types of niche public outreach programs. So public outreach strategy, design, and implementation, that's something we've always been known for. The research piece of this too, being able to help and advise on the survey creation, the moderator's guide, all of that good stuff, especially since I know right now there is a RFP out for polling on this. Stakeholder outreach. Paid advertising, so that's paid advertising, television, print, that's digital, that's direct mail, online. We have those capabilities to do all of that. Video production, which is actually important to what I'm proposing for fiscal year 2018-2019, so I'll talk about that a little bit more. Online and organic social media, this would be your website and Facebook posting and all that kind of stuff. And then, as I mentioned, those ground game activities, which it's door knocking, talking to people, and being able to do that both in a campaign situation as well as a public outreach for agencies and corporate programs. So I apologize, this is so small, but it's really important to me that you all understand who is going to be working on this and what our roles are going to be. So I probably put way too much text on this org chart, but I really wanted to be specific to make sure there were no questions. I would serve as the program manager, the day-to-day, working with you all, working with staff, and overseeing the program and the implementation of it all. Gladys Cornell, who I think you all know, who's the principal at AIM Consulting, she does a lot of your work on the general outreach projects that you have. We have actually added her as a formal member to our team to make sure that all of the activities are completely in lockstep, where we can maximize efficiencies with what she's got going on with her various programs and what we're looking at for our funding strategy, and make sure we're doing everything we can to work down one goal here. And then Jeff Flint, I did include him, even though he's down in Orange County. He will be an important part of this in terms of being a strategic advisor, analysis, the research part of this, that will have him to help as well. And then Aldo Panesci, who I think most of you know as well, we worked with him on the last, not only the campaign, but in the public outreach program prior. He will be brought on to help with elected official and influencer outreach to the education community, the business community, healthcare community, as well as the tourism community. And then we do have somebody else that we're bringing on to do labor and heavy construction outreach to that community as well. And then Nancy works with me in Sacramento, and she helps with all of the campaigns. So like I said, apologize that this is so small and there's so much text on it, but I really wanted to make sure you all knew what we had going. So challenges for 2020. This is one of a piece of our proposal that we did focus a lot of time on, because the agency conducted polling in 2017, and it looked really good, and quite frankly, it fell in line with what we saw when you looked at the election results from 2016. A lot of support, and almost nearly 70% support in South Placer. But, and I've said this, we can't rest on that. We can't rest on our laurels. The environment looks different than when it did back in 2016. There's a lot of things to consider. As Mike mentioned, one of the first things that we want to do is have a post-election or election postmortem. We really need to understand the effects of Prop 6, whether it passes or it doesn't pass. That's going to really affect what our message is, why we need more or why we still need it, what that looks like, what local control means for dollars. So Prop 6, obviously, that's the number one thing. I will actually be going this weekend to the Self-Help Coalition Conference, where this, no doubt, will be the topic of the day. Okay, another challenge, Phase 1 construction on I-80 Highway 65. This is no surprise. You've all seen the construction has gotten started. We all understand what that elaborate construction process looks like, but to the average resident, they don't. So we want to make sure that we're able to communicate that there's so much more that goes into that. Other tax measures too. Since 2016, there have been other tax measures that have been put on the ballot and have passed. Not sales tax measures necessarily, some, but then there's also been some parcel taxes. The point being is that there's been a number of taxes. People don't realize what is what and what this is for, what that's for, and we want to do some education around that. And then a misconception that Measure M passed. I still hear that. So I have to combat that. And growth. People see rooftops, people think that's why there's traffic. We all know, again, it's a much, much more complicated process than that, but being able to discuss that. And then, of course, forming the district and getting that done and supporting Mark and his program in any way that we can. Despite all of these challenges, and different challenges than what we faced the first time around, all of the stakeholders that I've spoken with, for the most part, agree that this is the most major infrastructure investment that we will be putting, or essentially be put before voters for the next, for the foreseeable future. And everyone that I've spoken with really understands the need to have to get this done so that we retain the economic prosperity that we experience here in South Placer. So the program that I'm going to go through, just very quickly, I believe meets these challenges, but also does it in the time frame that we have available. So the approach. As I've mentioned, Mike's mentioned, the election postmortem that's scheduled for November 14th, really understanding not just Prop 6, but how the various local measures that are on various ballots here in Placer County, how those fare, and really looking at an analysis on what those results are. What we can find out at that point. As we've seen in past cycles, a lot of times we don't know on election night anymore what the verdict is. So at that point, up at least until the 14th, what we know, and then there may be a follow-up that we end up having to have. Leverage lessons learned. We did learn a lot of lessons the last time around through the last public outreach phase, through other campaigns that I've been involved with here in Placer County since 2016, and being able to leverage those lessons on behalf of this program and move it forward. Research, as I mentioned, I know that that RFP is out. That's slated for essentially Q1 of 2019, which is another important piece of this. We need to understand the election results, but we also need to go back to the voters and understand what they're thinking and really get a sense for how they feel about these various measures that have already been passed and just where they are with traffic. The fact of the matter is it's been 2 years since 2016. The traffic situation hasn't gotten any better, right? So I hate to say we have that on our side, but there is that piece that we have to look at. Stakeholder and community engagement, as well as outreach district formation support. So those are two different things that I see in fiscal year 2018-2019. That stakeholder community engagement piece is going to be a lot of, speakers bureaus. An idea that we have is to hold monthly stakeholders breakfast. So it's a small group where they're receiving updates from PCTPA or just coming to hear different speakers about what is on transportation and how it looks like in our county. As well as partner collaboration and leveraging the partners that we have, the chambers and the various nonprofits and healthcare community partners that we have, as an example, to be able to help us as we move forward. I make the joke that I really enjoy Executive Director Lucan, but I don't want to see his face out there as the outreach man. We need to leverage the partners that we have. And then on the other half of that is the outreach district formation support. So whatever Mark and his team needs to get that done, we'll support him in any way. As I mentioned, coordination with the general public outreach, meeting with Gladys regularly, understanding what her program looks like, conducting an audit of current communications tools that she's using, seeing which works, seeing what doesn't work, seeing where we can improve. The digital program, which this is something that we did not do the first time around in the public outreach program that we did prior. So not the campaign, but the public outreach part. But we really do have to have a digital program for this, and what I mean by that is paid advertising on Pandora, on social media channels, things of that nature, so that we can help get this word out. And when you look at the budget that I proposed for 2018-2019, that is one of the costs that we have identified that we want to use. The next is this idea of virtual reality and video production, which I will show you an example of in just a second. And then a stronger, more aggressive media relations strategy that, again, is utilizing those third-party partners that we have. So when I talk about virtual reality video production, so in the last public outreach effort, we had a great stat where we would go out and talk to people and say, and we would tell them, 20 years from now, or 10 years from now, 5 years from now, this is how long it's going to take you from the county line to this, wherever, pick wherever you wanted to go. That's not enough. Like I said, the stakes are higher, the game has changed, the landscape has changed. We want to go the next step to be able to show them that. And the idea of doing some reality video production where it enables somebody to actually experience what that will be like 5, 10, 15 years out, with or without a local transportation measure. And so then you say, great, we're going to produce these. How are you going to get these out? Because that's the next question, right? And we would utilize our paid digital advertising program to disseminate these videos out to get people starting to really think about this and then get them back to our website. to get the information and start to understand why. So this is something that I put in the budget for fiscal year 2018-2019. I think it's really important to have. I think it's really important for people now, after seeing this and living this myself. We need to go one step further. People need to really experience what this would be like and really understand the severity of it. So I wanted to put this in there just to talk about this a little bit. That actually, oh, one more, timeline. I thought we were done. So the timeline again, I realize this is so small too, I'm so sorry, but wanted you to have all the info. This is what I've proposed for 2018-2019. I agree. I do not want to spend any money until we understand what happens in November, until we get our research back, until we understand really what the new administration at the state is thinking, what they're doing. I don't see any sense in starting to commit funds in a digital advertising way and all of these other ways until we really get a good sense of what our message will be and what our direction is. So if you look on here, most of the work that happens prior to January ends up being like the audit, the communications audit. It's the post-election mortem. It's starting to have these initial conversations with high-level stakeholders. They're activities that are very, very important, but they're not what I typically refer to as like hard costs in terms of commissioning design or production on any pieces, because I really want to make sure our messages are on point before we start to develop any sort of communications tools and tactics. And you'll see that the development phase for this fiscal year 2018-2019 actually doesn't start till Q2, Q3. So with that, thank you so much again for having me be here today. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
I don't see anyone having any questions here. Anyone from the audience have a question?
Comment?
Of course. Thanks, Sherry.
This is not a question. I just can't think of the great number of times when I have spoken after one of the so many highly qualified and experienced residents and people in this county, just like the person we just heard. It's just kind of flabbergasting the resources and people that we have available to use. The one comment I would make is I understand this is a 2-year, approximately $500,000 budget, and we are critical of spending that much money on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll bring it back for consideration. So I need a motion to authorize the executive director to negotiate and sign a contract, and then authorize to sign a master agreement and letter of task agreement.
Motion to approve. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Pardon? Any opposed, any abstentions? I think, I recognize all your voices by now.
Well, I know myself for the record.
Yeah, thank you. That's why I like him along. Okay, item number L, I-80 State Route 65 Interchange Improvement Projects.
Good morning again. I'm going to be presenting on this item, and we've got exciting construction going out there, so I'm happy to present kind of what's going on out there, and we got some great photos and videos also. So just a little context here. In 2008, hard to believe, 10 years ago, PCTPA board approved a corridor plan that fully funded the I-80 bottleneck through Roseville and directed federal earmark savings to go to the environmental document for the Interstate 80 State Route 65 interchange. So great direction from the board, and now we're seeing it actually on the ground. We're going to be giving a presentation on the latest construction, but I first want to introduce Jeff Johnson. Jeff, if you could stand up just for a second here. This is our Caltrans project manager. He's the one that's out on the ground. And just to give you context, there are 100 people per day working out on this site, probably well over that working on the project, but actually on the site every day is 100 people. And this is the gentleman that gets to manage all of that. And we really appreciate that he keeps this project on schedule and on budget. He does a great job. And he also does a great job coordinating with us. When any complaints come up, anything, I can give Jeff a call. He answers immediately, and we find a resolution. So I really appreciate his help. And if you have any specific questions about the construction, Jeff's here to answer those. All right, let's get to the project here. The overall Interstate 80, State Route 65 interchange, what we're reconfiguring is to add one additional lane to each of the 4 connectors between the 2 freeways. And that total cost of this interchange improvement is $450 million. So just to give you a little more background here, Caltrans completed the project study report. This is kind of the preliminary, does this make sense to move forward report. That was done in 2009. Then PCTPA obtained both state and federal environmental approval in 2016. And of course, the project includes 4 construction phases. So Caltrans moved forward with design of phase 1, which is currently under construction. And that was completed in June of 2017. And the entire phase 1 project is within existing right-of-way. So we didn't have to acquire any right-of-way for the project you're currently seeing under construction. So in 2012, the board directed staff to include improvements to northbound Highway 65 as part of the first phase of the Interstate 80 State Route 65 interchange. And as shown here, the first phase includes a 3rd lane on northbound Highway 65 from Interstate 80 all the way up to Pleasant Grove Boulevard. And we're also improving the Galleria Boulevard, Stanford Ranch Road interchange. Many of you probably remember this event. This was the groundbreaking in December of 2017, just last year. And of course, reconfiguring the interchange is PCTPA's #1 priority. And phase 1 will not only improve the quality of life for residents, businesses, and visitors, but as I mentioned, it already has a direct economic benefit in that 100 people are working on this project every day. And of course, they stay in hotels, eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner in our county and have an economic benefit. So this kind of gives you a sense of the magnitude of this project. It's quite the thing to go down underneath the East Roseville Viaduct and actually see this project under construction. And of course, Flatiron was selected as the contractor by Caltrans, and construction began in May, just in May of this year. And there are 12 new columns that need to be constructed, and you can see them on the left side of the photo here. Just to give you a sense, I think we've mentioned this before, they had to drill holes for each of the 12 columns that are 100 feet down and 13 feet in diameter. And then, of course, they filled that with rebar and concrete to create the foundations, and then they built these columns that are 60 feet high. And I'm happy to say that all 12 columns are already finished since May. So they're making great progress out there. And what everyone can't see that's driving along is they see 3 cranes, but they don't really know what's going on. So we've been doing these videos, and we did the first one in June. And that video in June, when we released it, had 11,600 views. So they're getting a lot of traction. We just released this video October 1st. It already has 6,300 views. So I want to thank AIM, our public outreach consultant, for doing a great job on these videos and also getting them out to the public. So I'm going to let you watch this video. And you do also have a handout here. This kind of went along with the video. We sent out an email update to anyone that's interested in the project. So here goes the video.
Hi, my name is Mike Luke, and I'm the Executive Director of Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. So today, we have 210,000 cars a day that pass through the I-80-65 interchange project. That is planned to grow in the future as we grow from 390,000 residents in Placer County today to 500,000 residents in the near future. And with the increase in housing units, with the increase in office construction, retail construction, this project will have a great benefit to moving goods and services and residents and travelers in and out of this region.
Good morning, Amarjeet Benipal, Caltrans District 3 Director. We are excited to be at the construction site of Highway 80 and 65 interchange reconstruction project in Placer County. So we are here to actually visit the site and trying to look at what the activities are going on today.
We have a tremendous partnership with this project with Caltrans, the Federal Highways Administration, with our participating agencies, which are Placer County, the City of Roseville, the City of Rockland, the City of Lincoln, and other regulatory partners in the project, such as Union Pacific Railroad and the other permitting agencies that have made this project possible. It's a very exciting project for Placer County. It means a lot to the business community, to the traveling public in Placer County. We're out at the viaduct area of the construction project, and behind us is the improvement to the Galleria Stanford Ranch interchange project, which is a vital component of this project. It'll have a tremendous economic benefit to the Galleria Mall, to Creekside Town Center, to Costco in the areas of Rockland and Roseville, improving access into and out of those businesses, which are used frequently for residents of Placer County and visitors to Placer County.
And we're already working on a video for December. We've lined up Assemblyman Kevin Kiley and also the owners of the Galleria Mall and Fountains to come out and do an interview, and that will be released sometime in December. So I want to say that we've had a successful partnership with Caltrans, and both agencies are providing up-to-date information to the public on the project. PCTPA is providing more general information like the video you just saw, while Caltrans is providing more day-to-day information on detours and traffic updates. And they actually, Caltrans is sending out a weekly email. You can sign up for that at 8065interchange.org, but that goes out to over 1,200 people every week. In addition, for the residents near the project site, there are flyers that have been handed out door to door. Actually, Caltrans walks door to door to all those apartment complexes, and so far we've handed out 3 flyers, one before construction actually started, another one before the pile driving started, and then more recently before the bridge railing demolition began. So those flyers actually have my direct number on them, and it also has Caltrans' direct number on them if there's any questions or concerns. So even with all this public outreach and noticing, there's still noise and dust with the construction. And as you can imagine, with any large construction project, we really have a choice here. Do we do construction at night and inconvenience the residents that are next to the facility, or do we do construction during the day and inconvenience the traveling public? Of course, there's 120,000 people driving on Highway 65 every day. So we've worked with Caltrans to minimize the impacts to nearby residents, and I want to say that I've personally talked with many residents in the area, and they are very patient and understanding of the project. And so we have a good communication going now, and we want to keep that up. And the good news is that the early dust problems were solved by adding another water truck. And then also the recent pile driving that occurred has been completed. And then lastly, the demolition of the bridge railing, which you see on the picture to the right here, was moved to the daytime starting this last Monday. So here's a drone image of northbound Highway 65, and the viaduct that's the East Roseville Viaduct you see in the top left corner there. That is going to be widened 30 feet to the outside to accommodate the new third northbound lane. This is a photo here as we move further north of the Galleria Boulevard Stanford Ranch Road interchange. And what you see is that northbound off-ramp. We're actually going to signalize that northbound off-ramp that's going towards Costco there. And what that's going to do is eliminate that weaving. If you've ever taken that, you got to weave over like 3 lanes to make a left to go towards Costco. People will take turns, just like what happens now on the southbound off-ramp. And the contractor has already, as I mentioned, we have those 12 columns already constructed. The contractor's already placing the false work to widen northbound Highway 65 viaduct up to 30 feet to the outside, and Phase 1 improvements are planned to be open in 2020. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I just want to say thank you for showing the video. I came across that video somewhere on social media. I can't even remember where, but I right away sent it to Mike and asked him to show it here so that all of us could see it, because that's the best way to give the message. And so nice work is really all I have to say. Anyone else have any? And Mike, do you have something to say?
I do want.
Oh, sorry, Ken.
Do that. That's okay. So I just want to thank Mike and Luke. All the studies you do, all the work you do to try to understand noise doesn't always necessarily produce the true outcome and understanding of what that noise sounds like. And so when that construction began and breaking down that barrier, it was a lot louder than one expected. And I can tell you, being a person who got a half a dozen phone calls at 1:30 in the morning where they held their cell phones up for me to hear the jackhammering, it was a little louder than we had expected. I want to thank Mike and Luke for their efforts to quickly address that so that we could mitigate that and make changes to the plans and meet the needs of everyone that was impacted by that. So you did a great job. Residents are very happy. We've received a lot of emails and phone calls just thanking us for addressing it. And from what I'm seeing, both driving through that area, but also in feedback on those who are driving through as well, it doesn't appear to have had a major impact. So again, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
As I mentioned to Luke earlier, I drove down just to see what the difference was shifting from night to day. And I think rather than, while I agree with what you said, helping to meet the needs, I think it was helping to spread the mitigation to everyone, causing a little bit more traffic impact than I had seen in the past, as well as, I'm sure, mitigating the noise at night. And then, Mike, I thought your presentation on the video was very informative and very well done. Thank you for that.
All right.
The only thing I was going to say, Madam Chair, is that one other item that we were able to work on, but it ended up being a practice run, is we had talked about before wintertime of having a partial closure of the Stanford Ranch Galleria interchange. And that is in the contract, and we will have that in the future, and we were going to try to do that before the holiday shopping season. We ended up, the contractor not needing that, and that'll be pushed off to the spring, so we'll probably still see doing that possibly at some point in the future. But one of the benefits of having a practice run is we quickly assembled a team from the City of Rockland staff and the City of Roseville staff and our Public Works and PIO and everybody, and so we have that team assembled together so that when we do have the opportunity or occasion to close it, to get work done quicker, we can quickly assemble that team and put those folks together and handle that situation so that we get the word out to the public very quickly. We work with our partners. We've already preliminarily discussed things with the Galleria, with Creekside, with Fountains, with Costco, so we have those contacts in place again, so when we need it, we have the ability to respond very quickly. So.
Thank you. Thank you for the information. Board's executive director's report. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to ask a question?
I wanted to make a comment on this agenda.
Okay.
Mike Arabedian for the Sierra Club. Because of the critical nature of the safety hazard of the backup on westbound I-80 to exit onto 65, that was a primary reason the Sierra Club does not oppose this project. We are not opposing what we understand is the 3-year, phase 1, $50 million cost of this project, though I've seen costs up to $70 million. But in any event, we're not opposing it.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Lucan.
Yes, very quickly, under the executive director's report, just a couple things, a few things I wanted to bring to your attention very quickly before we close our meeting. One of the things that we worked on very hard in 2017 was to try to put together funding applications for the I-80 Ox Lanes project and for the third track phase 2 project, which would potentially bring 10 Amtrak trains per day under the California Capital Service to Roseville in the South Placer region. Those projects we found through the process that we applied for, called Solutions for Congested Corridors. We found out through that process that we are not competitive, if you will, on our own. And so one of the strategies that we employed is to look for partners that we could combine projects with, which could together compete against larger metropolitan areas. We put together a group of agencies, if you will, SACOG, CCJPA, Caltrans District 3, and PCTPA to kind of look at what would be the best way to work together on putting together a group of projects that could get funded. At the same time, the state changed the rules for the Solutions for Congested Corridors program, that they now require a corridor plan. So we actually have an item that will be before the Sparta board meeting, but we wanted to bring it up at this meeting, which would be to actually complete a corridor plan that could potentially extend from J Street in Sacramento all the way to the I-80, Business 80 split, and then up to Auburn, and then up to Lincoln on a Highway 65, that could look at a true commute shed for the visitor traveling public on multiple modes. So this is a case where we're looking at roads, we're looking at transit, we're looking in the form of rail and bus transit, and we're looking at the potential to connect things such as Valley Vision's initiative to connect regional bike ped corridors. And so over the next year or so, and again, this assumes that SB1 survives, there is an opportunity to create a corridor plan that could take a comprehensive look at creating systems that would improve multiple modes of transportation in that commute shed, and at the same time make us eligible for a very significant funding source for these projects. So we wanted to bring that to your attention. We're working with these groups to put together funding for that plan, and that would be a plan that would be not only involve roughly 13 to 15 public agencies along that corridor, but could also bring together many stakeholder groups, some of whom have spoken today, but to really look at this comprehensively and look at a multimodal corridor that looks at different ways to move people around, and also kind of break down barriers of jurisdictional boundaries and other things that we've had trouble in the past. As an example, transit could be more effective if it could cross county borders to get to destinations versus going to a transit center that we had to, in the past, create because it's right on the county border. This is the kind of thing that this corridor plan could look at overcoming those barriers. So wanted to bring that to your attention. The second item is, and we mentioned this to you at the last couple meetings, we're working still on with the city of Rockland to host the California Transportation Commission meeting on January 30th and 31st. The CTC is very busy in their current meeting, so this week we're going to kind of start the process of working out all the logistics of that week, that last week of January. Again, that could include a potential tour of South Placer County with these decision makers for transportation projects. It could include things such as reception and dinners with commissioners, and we're also working with some other groups that have activities in the region at the time to coordinate on to that fashion. This is a very, very important meeting. We haven't hosted this group since 2007. To bring these folks here to show them what Placer County is all about is very important, because these are the folks that our projects are in front of to get funding. From an economic impact standpoint, similar to what Luke was talking about in terms of having people in the region on a temporary basis, This will bring 200 to 300 people to our region, to South Placer County, that'll spend money in our restaurants and our hotels and utilize our facilities. And so it does have a direct economic impact to the region. The next item I'll mention is another effort that we have been starting to work on, and this was actually somewhat included in the CTSA budget item that David talked about. Over the past 6 weeks or so, we've been working a group, including the President's Office of Sierra College, Mayor Broadway and Mayor Rohan, and PCTPA staff have been responsive to a request from Sierra College. They'd like to create a transit pass program for their students, similar to what's done in other community colleges throughout the state, with the effort to reduce congestion in and around Sierra College. And so we will probably embark upon a short feasibility study to look at whether that's feasible. At the same time, the Sierra College will be talking to its students to see if they want to assess themselves for the cost of such a program. Lastly, I wanted to we touched upon this in a couple items, but emphasize our November 14th special meetings that we've scheduled. So we've scheduled a meeting from 4 to 5:30 p.m. to go over the post-election discussion for the funding strategy approved today by the board. And then a second half, so then we would break for a very informal pizza dinner. And then following that, we have a very important discussion where SACOG and PCTPA staff are going to have invited the elected leaders, the board, as well as all the elected leaders for the county, to come for a discussion and workshop on the MTP so we can understand the ramifications and the process moving forward with this very important update for the Sacramento region, and then how does our regional transportation plan, which has been before you for discussion, how those two documents fit together, how that impacts our communities from a land use standpoint and transportation standpoint. So that will be from 6 to 7:30 in that evening. So wanted to outline that, and if you have any questions on any of these items, I'd be happy to answer them before we move on.
Any questions? Any board direction to staff? So I just have a funny little story to tell you to end our meeting with. On my way here this morning, I arrived and parked my car with 10 minutes to spare and heard a funny noise in the back of my car and realized I'd forgotten to drop my dog off at doggy daycare. So I apologize for my tardiness, is all I have to say. And
as long as the dog's involved, you're good.
Oh, I felt horrible. And so, Mike, you'll have about 6 missed calls from me when you get to your phone saying, please just give me 3 minutes, I will be here.
And usually I don't leave my cell phone anywhere, but today of all days I left it back at the office, so sorry about that too. So.
All righty, so thank you very much, and this meeting is adjourned.